Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. In today's story, we'll follow a young nurse named John, who takes an unexpected path to love when he helps a mysterious girl in need, going against the wishes of his wealthy father and ruthless clinic administrators. So here we go. Enjoy the story. John had been working as a nurse in a private clinic for 2 months. He didn't really socialize or try to make friends with anyone. Everyone who worked there considered themselves a step above those who worked in regular hospitals. If a new person came, they'd look down on them for a long time, treating them condescendingly and with disdain. But it didn't work that way with John. The staff, as usual, started looking down on him, trying to teach him, especially since a young man had come to work in what was essentially a woman's profession. But it soon became clear that John couldn't care less about their attitudes. In fact, he looked down on them very condescendingly. There was Zoe on John's shift. That's how she introduced herself. The girl didn't hide that she didn't love her profession and hadn't come here to save people, but to find that one wealthy patient she could leave her job for and never work again in her life. John soon learned about Zoe's dreams. He couldn't resist asking, "Zoe, but young and beautiful people hardly ever get sick. How are you going to find a worthy man?" "Age and looks aren't that important to me," she replied. "So you're hoping to marry for money?" "What's wrong with that? Thousands of girls do it," John smirked. "Zoe, have you seen those girls? They prepare themselves for being millionaires from childhood, know 2 languages, are constantly dieting. Everything about them is perfect." Zoe choked on her pastry, setting it aside. "Are you saying I'm fat?" "No, of course not. But to interest a pampered rich man, charisma isn't enough." John looked Zoe up and down. Not even that much charisma. From that moment on, the girl became enemy number 1 for John, though that's exactly what he wanted. He couldn't stand overly curious people. Zoe even managed to poke her nose into his plate when he was eating. Now she kept a respectful distance, and John could breathe freely. One time he was sitting in the nurses' station while 2 young nurses were whispering about something. It turned out they were talking about how the chief doctor had fired a nurse yesterday for being 10 minutes late to work. "Can you believe it, John? He didn't even let her explain. He just said, 'You're fired,' and her mother is sick at home." "Strange. The chief seemed like a normal person to me." The girls waved their hands dismissively. "He's gone crazy. You just don't know him. Anyway, the rest isn't interesting." John left, and the girls continued talking about him. "He's kind of strange, isn't he? Good looking, but it doesn't seem like he has a girlfriend. And he hasn't hooked up with anyone here. Yeah, he keeps to himself. Did you see his watch? I saw an actor wearing one like that in a magazine. I mean, I get that it's just a knockoff for John, but why? Why does he have it? Sometimes I think he's looking for a partner like our Zoe." "No way. He doesn't seem like that type." "Then what's he doing here? A normal, healthy guy working as a nurse?" Honestly, John probably couldn't even answer what he's doing here himself. John was proving to everyone that he was worth something, that he could live without asking anyone for help, that he was a man who could back up his words. Just 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined ending up like this. But there was no going back. His shift was almost over. He loved the night shifts. He could ponder, read, or just stare into the darkness. Tonight there had been such a strong blizzard that it was cold just looking out the window. He was about to start getting ready to leave. In winter it gets light so late that he'd make it back to his rented apartment before it was properly daylight. That's when he saw a girl making her way along the path, which had been thoroughly covered in snow overnight. She was heading towards the hospital. He managed to make out that she was likely just a bum, and at that moment, she fell. John stood up. "Come on. Get up." But the girl didn't even move. John rushed outside, scooped her up from the snowdrift, and hurried back into the hospital. He nearly ran over a doctor at the ER entrance. "What's going on here?" John knew full well he wouldn't be patted on the head for this. Bringing a near-homeless person into a hospital where only the elite came. He didn't bother answering, just carried his bundle into the ER. He quickly examined the stranger. Clear signs of hypothermia, and bruises all over her body. But nothing too serious, it seemed. She was just coming to, and looking at him fearfully. Who are you? Don't worry, you're in the hospital. No, I can't be, I have to leave. But her weakened legs wouldn't support her. At that moment, the chief doctor burst into the ER, waving John's employment records in the air. Out! Get out of my hospital immediately. The last thing I need is for all the dregs of society to be brought in here. I'm giving you such a bad review. No clinic will hire you now, not even the worst public hospital. John snatched his papers back. He wanted to say something, but caught Zoe's gaze. She looked ecstatic. Happiness was radiating from her. John shifted his gaze to his other colleagues. None of them looked upset. And of course, none were going to jump to his defense. On their faces, he could read, "Serves you right, idiot. Good thing it's not me." But what can I say? People? What did you take that oath for? John waved his hand dismissively, scooped up the girl whose muscles were thawing, causing her teeth to chatter violently, and went to hail a cab. He realized he simply couldn't get her back to his apartment. And though he needed to save money, especially since he probably wouldn't get paid by this clinic, John kept trying to flag down a ride. A couple cars stopped, but immediately drove off after seeing his companion. Finally, some old guy in a Chevy stopped. He drove in silence, but just before dropping them off, he said, "You should stop letting your lady drink so much, huh? Look at her, doesn't even look human." Only then did John realize why no one would pick them up. The girl looked so haggard that she swayed even just standing still. At home, he made her take a hot bath. He could see she was barely alive, but he had to get her cleaned up and fed. John was afraid she'd fall asleep right at the table, but she didn't. As the stranger warmed up and ate, she seemed to become more lively, even a bit nervous. "My name's John, and I'm Kate. Tell me, where did all those bruises come from?" "My stepfather. You see, my mom died a year ago, and he decided to marry me off to his son. The son even divorced his wife for it." "Oh, not bad. Big inheritance?" "More like debts. You see, if I inherit my mom's farm, there will have to be an audit since he's been the only one running the company for 2 years. But if his son marries me, then something happens to me, and that's it. I can't go anywhere. They'll catch me, but I can't drag you into this either. I've been running from them for a month." "Well, you're worrying for nothing, don't you think?" "What are you saying? They have money, even the people working for them, and you're just a regular nurse, sorry. Now that they're after me too, you won't be able to do anything." John wanted to explain, but his guest simply collapsed off the chair. He nearly killed himself seeing it, but he realized she was acting strange. He carried her to the couch and took her temperature, 104F. To be expected, really. John gave her a shot and reached for the phone. "I just need to make one call and admit defeat." He looked at Kate, so pure, young, beautiful. "Hey, Dad, I need your help." His father arrived half an hour later. As soon as he walked in, he started nagging. "Well, son, can't do anything without Daddy's help, can you? Just like I said, you spoiled rich kids are useless." John had left home after a fight with his father. His dad thought everything John wanted was stupid. He had only studied to be a doctor for 6 years abroad, so he could goof off without supervision. And he only wanted to open a clinic to look cool in front of girls. John didn't understand why his father treated him that way. And when his dad said, "Where would you be without my money?" John walked out and slammed the door. But then his father saw the girl. "John, who's this?" "Dad, please listen." He told his father everything he knew. "Understand, Dad, in this situation, my willpower alone isn't enough to help her. I just had to turn to you for help. Please don't refuse. Why do you want to help her? What if she's lying to you?" "Maybe, but you'll be able to find out." John was silent for a bit. His father was a very perceptive man. "Dad, I like her, and I wouldn't want anything bad to happen to her. You'll make her marry you out of gratitude?" John stared at him for a moment, then laughed. "No way. Living with someone who sees you as a cross to bear their whole life?" An hour later, his father got a phone call. He listened, then hung up. "Well, son, there's a slight problem." "What is it?" "She turns 18 in a week. If they find her here before then, you could be in serious trouble." He thought for a moment. "Please don't give me back to them. I'll do anything. I can clean floors, cook." John's father looked at the girl in surprise. She had clearly been awake for a while. "We have people to clean floors around here." "Oh, what am I going to do with you two?" Up to the house. John had a suitcase, a couple large bundles, a few boxes. It looked like he was moving out. A neighbor peeked out. "Where are you going, John? Who's going to take my blood pressure for me?" "Moving. To another city, another hospital." The old lady sighed and closed her door. The week flew by in a single day. John was amazed. For her age, Kate was very educated. It turned out she had been kept inside for the last year, and so had spent her time reading, consuming anything in the home library. "Kate, you could easily start in the final year of college." She blushed. "You think so?" His dad shared updates. Kate was being searched for seriously. How did he know? If it all came to light, her stepfather would face charges on multiple counts. "So what do I do?" She shook her head, looking at John. "Kate, when were you supposed to inherit?" She sighed. "Either when I turn 21 or when I get married." Silence filled the room. Suddenly John smiled. "I know I'm a bit older. No, I trust you completely, more than anyone else. As soon as this is all settled, we'll get divorced so you can live in peace." Kate's relatives confronted them as they left the courthouse after the wedding. Her stepfather grabbed John by the collar, yelling, "You have no right, she's underage." But John's father stepped between them, and security immediately intervened. Glaring, John's dad said, "Get out of my way before I crush you like a bug." The only person from Kate's side at the wedding was her very elderly godfather. When he heard the story of how they met, he just shook his head for a long time. Then he hugged Kate, asking why she hadn't told him anything. He left without even saying goodbye. Kate said her godfather used to be some big scientific figure. John understood the man's face looked familiar, but decided not to dwell on it. The next day, the godfather woke them up. John and Kate had to hurriedly push their beds together. "What are you two laying around for? Let's go, John. Time to take over the clinic." "Take over what clinic?" "I looked into your background and think you'll make a worthy director. Anyway, this is my wedding gift to you two. I'm too old for all this, and frankly, people are like animals." An hour later, they stood in front of the clinic doors. John and Kate exchanged glances. What a surprise. The godfather went ahead, with them following behind. The first person they met was Zoe. She looked at the elderly man fearfully and took off running down the hallway. A minute later, the chief doctor came scurrying over with his entourage. "Dr. Archibald, you should have warned us." "Why? Start packing your things, you're fired. As for the rest of you, allow me to introduce the person who will now be not only the chief doctor, but the owner of this clinic." Whispers broke out in the crowd. "John, the bum," he heard. "This bum the chief doctor threw out on the street, the woman he fired an innocent man over. She's my goddaughter." After those words, the chief doctor, still hoping for a mistake, glumly went to his office. Some people came up to congratulate John. Others left in silence. A year passed. Everyone in town knew John Alexis, so when he entered the maternity ward, the nurses practically lined up. But he looked at them in such a way that the line dispersed, with one nurse offering him a glass of water. "How's it going?" "All good, just wait." Kate had been dragging her feet about divorcing him. She never would. Even after they brought charges against her stepfather and would-be brother-in-law, she refused. No, he didn't want a divorce either. The more he got to know this girl, the more he dreamed of her staying by his side. But he had promised her. Eventually she said, "You're not getting rid of me that easily," and simply wrapped her arms around his neck, followed by a passionate kiss. That day he vowed to her that she would never be rid of him again. Now Kate was behind those doors, and soon he would see their son. If you enjoyed this story, please support me by clicking the like button. It's just a simple action for you, but it means a lot to me. All the best.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. "Excuse me, I haven't." I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit any time," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick? What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs. gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.